Good morning. My clock says 9 o'clock. We'll get started. Moving on to the first data slide. What we're looking at here is comparing the major components of the real estate market to where they normally are. And normal is the 5-year norm, and that would be right on this red horizontal line. So if you look at the blue line, that's the inventory that's currently available. And basically, it's floating right around 100%, right about where you expect to be. So that means the normal number of listings are available for a buyer to look at any given day. Next, we move on to the number of new listings. The new listings are sort of this darker orange line, and you can see that it came way down during shelter in place. Now we came up at about 100%, and now for the last several weeks, we've been pretty much above normal. We're running right now about 20% above normal would be my guess. You have these huge fluctuations, and that's because of when Labor Day fell on this year's calendar versus most years' calendars. But if you average that out, you're basically right here at 120%. The next one to look at is the number of new offers. This is how many new offers were accepted in the past week, because we're looking at the macro data. And I know this is a little unusual because I'm the one that's always says you can't compare condos and townhouses and single family, and I continue to agree with that. But if you're just trying to get an impact on what's happening with real estate because of COVID, then this actually becomes valid. So the number of offers accepted is the gray line, and you can see it's running about 20% above where you'd expect it to be running. And then closings is the light yellow line down here, and it's been basically at 100%, but now the last 2 weeks, maybe even 3 weeks, it's been up here at about 120% of normal. And there's a lag time between when the offers go up and when the closings happen because of the duration of escrow. So in a nutshell, for the last, 6-8 weeks, maybe, well, actually, if I was to pick a number, week 33 to 39, so that's the past 7 weeks, we've been basically at 20% above normal, and that's going to become significant in a little bit later. The only other data on here is the number of new cancellations, which is the green line. Very small number of properties overall, but it's just fluctuating all over the place. I am a little surprised that it's just not below the red line because the market is so hot. I don't understand how a seller can get unhappy and be canceling the marketplace, but all the last 5 years were good. So when you compare 5 good years to a good year, maybe you can't get any better than that. Moving on to overbidding. 2 different concepts here. One is the frequency of overbidding, and you can see that we've peaked a little bit, it looks like, and we've come down, not dramatically, but we're downslope. And that doesn't bother me. We're normally downslope much earlier in the year towards all the way to the end of the year. So the fact that we're going down a little bit doesn't bother me. Still, more than 50% of all sellers in San Mateo County and Santa Clara County are getting more than their asking price, including townhouse and condos that are not doing as well. And it's much harder to see the red horizontal line that's moving. You can see it's down here, it comes up, it's right through the rectangle, it's staying on the rectangle, it comes up. It's also sloped down ever so slightly, but we're still at about 102%. So that means that if you average all the overbids and underbids, the number comes out to about 102.2%, I believe was the number. So more that sellers are getting more than they're asking, not a whole lot more. That doesn't surprise me because COVID was a shock to the real estate market as well as the whole economy. And anytime that happens, buyers are tighter on overbidding on a particular house. They may overbid as much as frequently, but not as much. Moving on to overbidding distribution. This shows each of the lines. I have changed just for disclosure purposes. This is the best October ever, which was October 2017, this dotted red line here. So that would be sort of the highest you'd expect any of my lines to be. This out here is the best month ever, which was April of 2018. So that, and the difference between April and October is the different cycle of the year. Then on the flip side, you have the same thing for the blue lines. The inner of the 2 blue lines is the worst October we ever had, which was October of 2001. And the second out blue line is the worst December we had, which was December of 2001. So now what you're looking at is the actual red line is the current week's data, and you can see it's at the top of that line. So you're basically having the best week out of the last 20 weeks. The solid lines are the most recent weeks, and you can see they're pretty close together here. Then the dashed lines are intermixed. Those are the next group of 8 lines back, and the oldest lines are the 4 dotted lines down here, which are the oldest. So the oldest lines are basically May 22nd through June 12th. We're doing way better than those months, and we've basically been improving. Right now, we're sort of at the peak of the marketplace, and we've probably peaked last week if I was have to putting a particular week on it. Not coming down dramatically. Still expect it to be a better than normal year for the balance of the year, but we do slow down just because the holidays are approaching. Even with COVID, I think the holidays will have some impact on the real estate market. They're not as much as it normally does based on Labor Day, July the 4th, and Memorial Day, but will have some impact. Here's just cleaning up that same data. So now you're seeing the last 12 weeks, and you can see a little more clearly that the gold line is above here, and that is the week that ended on September 26th, just last week. And then you go all the way back to July 17th. So you can see back in July, which is normally sort of actually the peak of the market is usually the 5 weeks before Memorial Day. So even having this, so basically the month of May is the peak of the marketplace for closings, and sale price requires closings. So you can see that we are doing and been improving every month all the way through July, August, September, and not into October. Basically, the end of September is going to probably be the peak of the market this year. This graph I was actually chart I was talking about deleting, and I am still talking about deleting, but I did notice something that was really interesting, so I left it in there and added this in the bottom. Here you can see that we are 2,664 transactions short, and that was based on the 5-year median. And I did all the work spreadsheet here. I didn't have time to do that because this was a very last minute thing, but what I looked at is I compared simply the number of closings in 2020 compared to the number of closings in 2019 through the third quarter. So first, second, and third quarter. We are only 1,129 transactions short of 2019. Now, 2019 wasn't the best year out of the last 5, but it also wasn't a bad year. People weren't really complaining about it too much. So, that's pretty good. And what becomes even more interesting is third quarter, our fourth quarter that's coming up, I'd expect to have about 4,500 transactions. So if you take 4,500 transactions and add 20% to that, that's an extra 900 transactions. That 900 transactions is going to just about wipe this out. So at the end of 2020, we may have as many closings as we did in 2019. Now, there's a whole lot of things out there that could impact that I won't even get into, which is why I don't try to predict what the market's going to do and just try to stay on top of what the market's doing in real time to give you the edge on negotiations. So I don't think it's going to be so bad, and we'll see. Time will tell. Now we're moving into my color graphs, and these are, I think, finally working. Later on, we'll get into some historical ones that may have some errors into them. But the intent here is to shade, and I'm not shading these myself. It's all computerized, and the formula actually does the intensity of color based on the data. So what you do here is this area right here, Los Altos, Palo Alto, is sort of in a balanced marketplace. And I'm not adjusting for the differences in the different marketplaces. So a balanced marketplace is basically between 40 and 80. And in this case, if it's white, it should be between 50 and 70. That's just the way it works out. So if you look at it here and you come over and you see Los Altos, Palo Altos at 60.9 days of unsold inventory, that's in that realm. So basically this is coming through with white, no color. And then as the market heats up, it becomes a pale shade of pink, and then it becomes the dark shade of red. The shading happens between 25 and 50 days of unsold inventory, and then between 70 and 95 days of unsold inventory. So if you look at the real red stuff down here, it's all below 25. So basically, Campbell, Cambrian, Santa Clara, Willow Glen, Milpitas, North Valley, Berryessa, Santa Teresa, South County are all, and even Cupertino, Sunnyvale are all the same color red, because once you get below 25, I don't have any more darker reds without adding more complication that isn't worth the benefit. And then from 25 to 50, the shades go with the days of unsold inventory. So you can see that the affordable areas, East Central San Jose, South San Jose, are hotter or cooler than the hottest areas, but hotter than Saratoga, Los Gatos. And then you can come up into San Mateo County and sort of do the comparison. Now you might say, what's this blue? Well, the blue is basically saying you're above 70 days of unsold inventory, and the darker the blue is, the more above 70 you are. Now, I'm a little surprised, and I want to go back and look at formulas, because being only 7 days above 70, I would not expect it to be this dark dark blue. So I believe I have this blue way too dark, and I will try to correct that by next week. But in a nutshell, it shows you what's going on in the marketplace. It shows you how much of the marketplace is absolutely on fire. And, I will point out Saratoga Los Gatos is sitting here at 34, so it's sort of a medium red. Remember, that's really on fire for Saratoga Los Gatos because that's one of those areas where I say the normal marketplace is 75 to 150. Now, I could adjust all that kind of stuff, but then I thought that was just getting too complicated. So this graph is days on sold inventory without any adjustments for the micro market. It's sort of the pace of the marketplace, not telling you whether it's a buyer's marketplace or a seller. So it's just how quickly is the market overturning. So I'd expect this area, Atherton, the expensive areas, and Saratoga Los Gatos to be a blue shade a good part of the time, and maybe always in a deep blue because it's a slower moving market. Now we're moving on, same general concept, and this is frequency of overbidding. So the white colors here, you basically are somewhere between 40 and 50%, and we can actually look like Foster City. Foster City is at 47%. Palo Alto is at 44%. So I probably use something like 35 to 50% as white in color. Once you get above 50%, you start getting red in color. And if you're below 35%, you become blue in color. So Atherton, if you look at it here, is 21. So that is a deep blue, should be a deep blue. You come into Cupertino Sunnyvale, and you're sitting at 73. It should be a deep red. Milpitas is sitting here at 79. Yes, I actually did that incorrectly. This here is, that's Cupertino and Sunnyvale. The shading does appear to be off slightly still because that's 73. You go to Milpitas at 73. So that shade and that shade should be the same, and they're clearly not. So I need to do a little bit of investigation. But in general, I didn't see anything out of order completely. You come down here to South County. Now, remember, it was really on fire, but it's at 62, so its shade is lighter than Milpitas like you'd expect. And then if you go up to San Mateo County up here, it's at 76. So every color's in the right proportion. It just, my gut says that's a little too dark, but, maybe my eyeballs aren't completely adjusted. And then you can see the coast, it's a little less frequently to overbid, but still you can tell in just a glance that, and actually I'll have to look up what the percentages are because it's only 45. So I probably used a narrow range. I probably used something like 40 to 45. If I do that gap in the middle, it's much harder on me. So there's one point, and it's probably real close to Los Altos. It's probably 45 days. So at 45 days, it's going to be white. This is going to be slightly pink because it's above 45 at 46. And Los Altos, even though I wasn't picking it up, this is probably slightly blue at 44. So that's what I did, and I'll confirm that and have it ready for next week, but I think that's what I did. Now you move on to the same concept in magnitude of overbidding. This is how much over asking price. And right off the bat, you can see how the expensive areas in San Mateo County are blue at 97.8%. That's a pretty low percentage. It's pretty hard to get below about 97.5%. Once you get below that, what happens is buyers wait for sellers to lower their price instead of coming in. And then you can see that even though Morgan Hill was really on fire, and that's also a slower marketplace, it really isn't overbidding. And the only explanation I have for that is that the agents down there have never had the magnitude of overbidding like we've had since it's normally a slower marketplace. So they're just not used to overbidding like we are in the heart of Silicon Valley. So the concept here appears to all be working. Maybe I need to do a little more fine tuning. The redder the area, the hotter the market, the higher buyers are overbidding. The bluer the market is, the less they're overbidding. And then the last chart like this is price. And this is not price appreciation, which I consider doing, but just what's the price is. So boom, you can look at this map, and if you have someone in a low price budget, the cheapest areas are right here, 4, 9, and 11, followed by South County, followed by North San Mateo County, which might price be some people, followed by Milpitas and Santa Teresa, followed by Campbell, followed by the Coast, followed by Redwood City, followed by San Mateo County Bay Cities, which really surprised even myself, followed by Sunnyvale and Cupertino, followed by Los Gatos, Saratoga, followed by Palo Alto, Los Altos, and followed finally by Menlo Park Catholic. So in a nutshell, just by looking at the color, you can see the price order. And with that, I've made it through the week Now we're going to do it a little more slow pace. And at this point, if you have any questions, please ask them as I'm doing a slide. We're now looking back to the macro data. So this is 1 week, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, single family homes, condos, and townhouses. And we're looking at available listings that are active without an accepted offer. And so you have the blue line, which is the data, and then the gold line is the 5-year median of the available listings. And if you look at that, I mean, you can not have expected it to be that close to a normal 5 years. And again, the last 5 years I'm comparing it to are 15 through 19. Those were all 5 great years. So the fact that we're having the right inventory to have a great year is pretty phenomenal based on what the country is going through and the local market's going through and shelter in place and everything else. And then the red line is basically on the red horizontal line because the inventory, the blue line, is so close to the gold standard, you're basically at 100%. So any given week, the buyers have basically had the same number of listings available as they have in the past 5 years. Now, you look at the number of new listings just for the 1 week. So this is what's happened in the last week. So you can see here there was a huge drop. There was no new listings coming on the market, but there was also no new sales, so inventory stayed at the normal levels. And then you can see that we fairly quickly started to be able to recover, and then all of a sudden in the recent weeks here, the blue line is above the gold line, and for the most part, you're having above average number of new listings coming on the market. And if I was to pick a number, it's darn close to 120%. Maybe it's a little bit lower, maybe about 118%, 115%. And that's probably a little bit more accurate than the 120%. But, it's very respectable. Moving on to number of accepted offers. Blue line is the data. You can see it plummeted down. Here are your lost transactions. Now your blue line is above your gold line. So, it's not very much, but we're making up this. And notice, from this point back, basically week 30 back, we're basically at 100% of the median. So if we look at it from week 22 to week 30, you were at 100%. From week 30 through week 39, you've been above, and right now I think you're about 120% above, and maybe even a little bit more, because 120 I'd be able to see it right there, and I can't, so it's off the chart. So you're actually having more than 120% of your offers accepted, and if you're at 150% new listings, what's that doing? It's driving inventory down, which is why our days of unsold inventory are so low. Now you look at the number of new closings. Remember, this requires the duration of an escrow, and so instead of at 30 days, at 35 days, that's when it started coming above normal. And we haven't plateaued yet, and you can see this 1 week we peaked at like 140% of normal. Now there is some fluctuation just because of when the end of the month comes and things like that, but and you can see the fluctuation on the 5-year median, and the 5-year median would be more stable than any given year because you're looking at the average or the median of 5 years. So you have a lot of fluctuation, but you can clearly see it's coming up. Now the 140% I think is going to be a fluke. I think based on what I'm seeing, we should come down here and be somewhere around 125%, which should be just about the same amount of overbidding as the number of offers, or above normal. Moving on to expired listings. Here, same concept. Blue line is your raw data. Gold is the standard. You're essentially right on top of one another. That's what you're seeing here. Back in time, it's clearly been above. I maintain that you had a lot of listings that were canceled back here. Those canceled listings went, not canceled, but withdrawn listings. When withdrawn listings stay on the market long enough, they hit their expiration date, they count as an expired listing. Now we're 6 months past this. Most agents take listings for 6 months or less. And so this is going to be probably normal going on out. There is going to be a fair amount of fluctuation. You can see the end of every month, and that's just because listing agents tend to pick the end of the month. And here you can see here's the 5-year median, and the peak obviously was offset by a week. And that's because in that particular month, the end of the month happened a week later. You can see a lot of them lined up with right on the peaks lined up. And then here again, you're off by 1 week. So that's the fluctuation that you have. It just depends on where the calendar falls, which is why I use a 5-week average now in my data on the micro markets instead of a calendar month to get rid of these huge fluctuations that tend to hide what's happening in the real marketplace. Moving on to new canceled listings. And again, canceled listings have been basically the absolute normal. That's why you're bouncing around the red horizontal. The one exception was right here after shelter in place was announced. And of course, I can understand why a lot of sellers immediately took their house off the marketplace. They just didn't want people coming through. They didn't know what was going on. They weren't comfortable. Withdrawn listings, all I have is the raw count because, as I said in the previous slide, when a withdrawn listing hits their expiration date, it becomes an expired listing, and that's where it gets tracked. It's double counting in my book, but I don't make the MLS guideline. Now we're going back to the graphs. This is macro data, micro data, and what we're going to do is we're going to look at the overbidding, and this is the frequency of overbidding, because I think that's a little bit more telling of what's happening in the marketplace instead of, especially now with the recent insults to the marketplace. So frequency of overbidding is a little bit more telling than magnitude of overbidding. So we're going to step through the last 5 weeks, starting with 5 weeks ago, and 5 weeks ago is 4 weeks plus 1 day. It's 5 Saturdays. And I believe I got the scale pretty well lined up, so you'll be able to just see the color change. So it's September the 5th, September 12th, September 19th, September 26th, and this week. So you can basically, and I'll do that again a little quicker, it's sort of neat. You can just sort of see the market change colors as you step through those graphs. And so
Right.
you can, did you have a question, Lily?
Yeah, Richard. I just wonder the page before, 22nd. Yes, on the no 20 no the maps that we're talking about.
22 or
Yeah,
19?
no 19.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the one that on the I can see you group the San Mateo County and Santa Clara County. Is that possible that you can rearrange by the highest percentage and to lowest one? So
Over here?
Yes, is that much better to see which one is the higher?
I'm actually keeping this order the same in sort of my normal order. And
Okay.
rather,
I mean, it just, it can be changed every week because but I think it is easier to see which area has highest, overbid or highest, the
I understand the concept.
percentage wise.
I understand. So basically what you'd want this to be going from, 71 down to 20. I don't.
Or, yeah, you can separate in 2 different counties, but.
Yeah, I'd rather not do that because I have to sort. This is the way it's already stored in my database.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's just.
What I was going to do is get rid of the overbid here and put it up here. It's up at the top here just to decrease it. But this order is the same. And the concept basically, if you look at it, is it's going from the least expensive areas to the most expensive areas in Santa Clara County.
Okay, I see. You already had some kind of, the classification.
Sort of an order to it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, that's good.
Order, what I'd actually be interested in is what abbreviations would you like to see over here? Like STER for Santa Teresa, Cambrian, I'm using CMV, but if you have any good abbreviations for these, I'd appreciate hearing them. But
yeah, this looks pretty recognizable.
I understand what you're saying. I understand the logic. It's just the next step for me, and I would rather keep it this way because what you do is you look at the map here. And you can quickly see that North Valley, Milpitas is one of the hottest areas. And then it's here and you can see it's 71. So you pick the hottest area by looking at the color, not by looking at the chart over here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree with you.
No problem. Thanks for asking. So now we do the same thing for days of unsold inventory. So now we get rid of the delay for closing and escrow and that kind of thing. And you can see that I had a little background here. So, going forward, I should be a little more consistent. But the concept is the same as I step through each week. You can see the colors change. So, like if you look at Palo Alto, for example, it's starting off very pale pink right now. It turns a darker pink here. Then it turns almost a white color here. And then stays a white color and stays a white color. Or if you move over into Los Altos, Sunnyvale, Cupertino, it's right this week. We'll go backwards and I'll do the same order, but otherwise, excuse people, including myself. So here's Cupertino, Sunnyvale, deep red on the 5th of September. Still a pretty deep red, but a little less deep. Back to the deep red, and then whoa, what happened? All of a sudden it jumped to pale pink. So that happens, and I think that's a bad data point because if I look over here, it's 24.6, so it should actually be hot. Yeah, I still have some issues with my color. So that what I noticed was the color going from deep red here to pink, but when you look at the magnitude of the number at 24.6, it should be red hot because here it was at 23.8 and it's graduated. So I clearly have a problem still that I haven't ironed out. I caught most of them, but apparently not all of them. So sorry about that. Here we're taking the first look, and this is preliminary, and I don't have the graphs, but here is data. You'll see that it says October the 6th because this is September data. We're not to October the 6th yet, so I can't possibly have that data, but I thought we were close enough that I just throw out some numbers that are going to be fairly close. And what I think becomes real interesting is if you look at DUI at 25.7 days and you look back, the only year that was hotter than this was 2017 at 24. And then you have to come all the way back. And I think this is the next highest one here at 33. So, I mean, we're blowing through. The pace of the marketplace is unbelievable for this time of the year. Now, granted, we're not quite there, but that's pretty amazing. You know, you had 5 good years here, and most of these numbers are in the 40s, so almost 50. And now we're sitting at 25, so we're half of that. I think that's noteworthy. Sales per day is very noteworthy. We're at 35 and a half. And if you look back here, we're nowhere near there except when you come all the way back to 2012. And then before that, we had a lot more sales, and the sales volume has just gone away. So we're basically having almost the busiest year currently that we've had in the last decade. And I don't think many people understand that. Overbidding at 102%. That's actually one of the best overbiddings that we've had. Now, again, we had a recent insult, and that number's artificially low. And so what I think is more meaningful is coming down here to the frequency of overbidding at 62%. Again, you come back here and you go, wow, the only year that jumps out is, again, 2017. In 2017-18, in a lot of aspects, were the best year ever. And so we're competing with the best year ever, which, you know, is something that I don't think people are paying any attention to. And I think this large sales volume is what's making up for that $4 billion loss in San Mateo and Santa Clara County, and we may make that up by the end of the year. So the residential real estate marketplace, I can't speak for the commercial, the residential may even end up making up for everything in volume. Here we're going on to the benchmarks, and what this is doing is just looking at what the market was before shelter in place, what it is currently in the middle column of each group, and then whether it favors the buyer or the seller. In single family homes, you can see that the market was on fire before, was on fire currently. In most of those areas, it's hotter now than it was before. There's a few areas like Los Altos, Palo Alto, Redwood City, and San Mateo County, where it's actually favoring the buyer. The expensive areas at Menlo Park, Atherton, is actually favoring the sellers. But I mean, at 77 days, it's still pretty slow. You come down to condos and townhouses, and it was sort of a balanced marketplace for the most part before, except the peninsula was on fire. Afterwards, most of the areas in a balanced marketplace, the moderate areas, Santa Teresa and Blossom Valley is on fire. It's the only condo market that's on fire. In general, it favors the buyers in San Mateo County, the sellers in Santa Clara County. And it's sort of interesting when you look at this, that the county overall favors the seller, where the affordable is the same, 2 favor the seller and 1 favors the buyer. It's the fact that these 2 favoring the seller outweigh as far as volume the other 2, which is why overall it's favoring the seller. So that's the concept throughout the whole thing here. There was
Richard?
Yes.
Richard, hi, this is Diane. So I think maybe just a typo. The expensive San Mateo County expensive, current at 77.3. So that should be a buyer, right?
No, because in this chart, normally that's a slower marketplace. So the balanced marketplace there is 75 to 150. So that's why these are both white. On the map, I'm not adjusting for the different micro markets. Here I'm adjusting for the different micro markets. So each micro market has a different speed.
Oh, okay.
The 40 to 80 works for single family and condos in every area except for South County, Saratoga, Los Gatos, the Post, and the expensive area in San Mateo County. Those 4 micro market areas are dramatically slower on a regular basis. They're all about 75 to 150. So no, that's not a typo. What is interesting, this is the very top of the balanced marketplace. This is the very bottom of the balanced marketplace. So there's a fairly dramatic change between these 2, which is why it's favoring the seller, even though it's in a neutral marketplace.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I need to spend more time to digest the data. It did. Right. Okay.
No problem. No problem. And we can, if we have time at the end, we can come back to that. And then on price, I changed it from favoring the seller to the buyer on whether it was up, down, or flat. And I thought that made a whole lot more sense. And, so if it is there in any given area like before, you can't say whether this is a hot marketplace or a cold marketplace because it's just a price. So it's only the change between the two. So single family homes are up in every single marketplace. Condos are up in most of the market areas are flat. And I think this might have been what was I wanted to point out is in Santa Clara County, you have two that are flat, two that are up, but county-wide it's down. And you might think to yourself, how can that happen? Easy. If all of a sudden the lower ends, these two, the affordable and the moderately low, if they're a larger percentage of the marketplace, they're below the 825, that brings down the median for the county, even though individual property values are going up. And that's what I find interesting is even though the condo market appears to be hit hard, their prices appear to be going up in value, which is not what you'd expect to have happen. This is the data for each one of the different areas, and this is as of this morning, October the 3rd. So you can come back and look at it. This is single family, different micro market areas in Santa Clara County. This is San Mateo County. This is condos in both counties. And then we go into, and we will not get through this, we have 11 different metrics, 5 slides in each metric, and we'll only talk about one. Here's where you can see days on unsold inventory. The yellow line is the condo market. It started off very hot for shelter in place, very cool afterwards. So the major takeaway is the condo market really slowed down. The single family home in San Mateo County is about the same. And so it's a single family home in Santa Clara County. So single family homes didn't seem to be impacted. Condo townhouses did. And I think we're also seeing a shift from away from the convenient commute areas to at least less convenient commute areas. Median days on the market, pretty meaningless through this period of time because the MLS froze. But you can see that even though we're in a hot marketplace, the number of median days on market is higher now than it was before shelter in place. And I don't think that's because the market's any slower. I think that's listing agents holding the property on the market an extra day to make sure they have all the people get in there to look at it. Here you're looking at the number of offers for the past 5 weeks. You can see the huge decrease with shelter in place, and then you can see the run up. What normally would be happening is you normally be coming down, normally around July 19th, somewhere about here is the peak of the marketplace, and you can see it's basically been flat, but still even going up. This here you were just below 1,200, maybe 1,175, and now you're hitting about 1,225. So you've gone up about 50 homes in a period of time when the market's normally going down, and that's because we're recovering some of those lost transactions, something I did not think was going to happen. And I would actually argue we're probably not recovering those lost transactions. But what we're doing is, when you think about it, shelter in place has had a huge impact on people's housing needs. So people that would not have been in the market, not for shelter in place, are now in looking for a different type of home to meet their new current needs. So we lost a bunch of transactions, but we're also generating even more different transactions. Looking at the number of closed transactions, it's basically delayed by the duration of escrow, but the same pattern, so I won't spend any time on it. Overbidding. You can see the overbidding was coming up. We hit, and the peak came after shelter in place because of the duration of close of escrow. It came down, came back up. It's not back up to the level it was, but it's not far off. You were at 70% here, you're at 62% now. If you look at the magnitude of overbidding, it's down fairly significantly, and that's just because buyers now tend to be more hesitant. We were up here around 106%, and now we're down here at about 102.45%, something like that. The condos are lagging behind. Here is the sold price. You can see there's really no pattern here other than basically flat to slightly up. This is the cheapest 10% in any given area. This is the median that most people track. Here the price trend is again up, basically flat, but maybe slightly up. Going to the 90 percentile, here the trend is flat and maybe up a little bit more than the others, but still, I would say overall is pretty flat. Duration of escrow, you can see we've gone from a faster marketplace before shelter in place to a little bit slower. but we're still doing it in about 30 days. And that's going to be it. So I'll take any questions in the last 2 minutes. And remember, next month next week, I'll be doing the monthly data for the month of September, because October 6th will have arrived.
Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Take care.